What if I told you that one of the most just, loyal, and stable gods in all of Greek mythology is the same one you were taught to fear? What if the real villain of the story was never the king of the underworld, but his heroic brothers who lived under the light of the sun, playing with the lives of mortals like they were game pieces? Forget the devil with horns and a pitchfork, forget the scheming firehead villain desperate to overthrow Olympus. Today, we are undertaking a serious journey. We will strip away centuries of misconception and fear. We will descend past the gates of the living, cross the rivers of sorrow and forgetfulness, and stand before the throne of the true king of the underworld, prepared to meet Hades, the misunderstood king, the guardian of souls, and perhaps the most honorable god of them all. Hello, legends and myths. Welcome to our channel. To truly understand Hades, we first need to perform a kind of cultural exorcism, casting out the simplified, cartoonish image of evil that has been projected onto him. Hades is not the Satan of Greek mythology. The underworld is not the Christian hell. It is the inevitable final destination for all mortals, and its ruler is not a tempter or a source of evil, but a cosmic necessity, a warden. His story begins in darkness and terror, long before he was a king. Hades was one of the 6 original children of the mighty Titans, Cronus and Rhea. This makes him the elder brother of Zeus and Poseidon. Their father, Cronus, lived in perpetual fear of a prophecy that claimed one of his own children would overthrow him. Just as he had overthrown his own father Uranus, his solution was monstrous, as each of his children was born. Ischia, Demeter, Eta Hades. Poseidon, he swallowed them whole, imprisoning them in the darkness of his own immortal belly. Imagine that existence, in eternity, trapped, aware but powerless. This was Hades' first kingdom. When the final child, Zeus, was saved by their mother Rhea and hidden away, he eventually grew strong enough to challenge their father. He tricked Cronus into disgorging his siblings, who emerged fully grown and burning with a desire for vengeance. Hades was the first son to be swallowed and the last to be freed. He had spent the longest time in that living prison. What followed was the Titanomachy, a cataclysmic, 10-year war that pitted the new gods against the old titans. It was a war of unimaginable power that shook the very foundations of the cosmos. Finally, the gods were victorious. But with victory came a new problem: how to divide the spoils of creation. The entire universe lay before the 3 victorious brothers. In a moment that would define existence forever, they decided not by strength, but by chance. They drew lots from a helmet. Zeus, ever the favorite of fortune, drew the longest straw, claiming the vast heavens and the earth as his domain, establishing himself as king of all gods. Poseidon drew the second lot, granting him dominion over all the seas, a kingdom of storms and mystery. And Hades, Hades drew the short straw. He was given the final third portion of the universe, everything beneath the earth, the dark, sunless, silent realm to which all mortal souls were destined to travel upon death. Think of the injustice. After being imprisoned for ages in his father's gut, he was then assigned to rule a kingdom of ghosts and shadows for eternity. He didn't choose it. He didn't fight for it. It was the role that fate assigned him. And here is where his true character is forged. While his brothers took to their vibrant realm, Zeus to the glorious parties and endless political dramas of Olympus, Poseidon to the wild freedom of the ocean, Hades did something remarkable. He accepted his duty. Without complaint, he descended into his gloomy kingdom and began the monumental task of organizing the afterlife. His job was to maintain the most sacred law of the universe, that the dead stay dead, and he was ruthlessly efficient at it. His kingdom, often just called Hades, was a complex ecosystem of souls. It wasn't simply a place of torment. It was the destination for everyone. To get there, a soul first had to be guided by Hermes to the banks of the river Styx, the river of unbreakable oaths. There, the grim ferryman Charon would transport them across, but only if they could pay the ferret coin placed in their mouth upon burial. Those without payment were doomed to wander the banks for a century. Guarding the gates on the other side was Cerberus, his monstrous 3-headed hound, a terrifying beast to any living being, but a loyal gatekeeper who ensured no soul could ever escape back to the world of light. Once inside, souls were brought before the 3 judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Diotchus. These were former mortal kings known for their wisdom and fairness. They would review a soul's life and assign them to their final resting place. Most souls, those who had lived lives neither exceptionally good nor evil, were sent to the fields of Asphodel, a gray, misty, and melancholic plain where they would wander for eternity as mindless shades, without memory or personality. The truly virtuous, the heroes and the righteous, earned a place in the Elysian fields, or Elysium. This was the Greek paradise, a sunlit corner of the underworld, where they would enjoy a blissful afterlife of leisure and peace. But for those who had committed truly heinous crimes against the gods or humanity, their destination was the deepest, darkest pit of the realm, Tartarus. This was the prison of the Titans and the place of eternal punishment. Here, Hades oversaw the torment of figures like Sisyphus, cursed to roll a boulder uphill forever, and Tantalus, doomed to stand in a pool of water he could never drink, beneath a fruit tree he could never reach. These punishments weren't sadistic. They were the embodiment of cosmic justice. But a king who rules over a kingdom of silent shades and tormented souls is a lonely king. And it is this profound solitude that brings us to his most defining myth, the abduction of Persephone. Hades fell in love. From his dark throne, he watched the world above and became captivated by Persephone, the daughter of his sister Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. Persephone was the very essence of life, youth, and spring. Her presence made flowers bloom. For Hades, the lord of the end of all things, she was an impossible, irresistible light. But how could he, the dreaded king of the dead, ever hope to win her? He approached the problem in a way befitting his character. He followed protocol. He went to her father, his brother Zeus, and asked for her hand in marriage. Zeus, caught between his powerful brother and his powerful sister, did what he did best. He equivocated. He gave a non-committal answer, neither granting nor denying the request. Hades took this as a green light. One day, as Persephone gathered flowers in a sun-drenched meadow, the ground beneath her split open. A great chasm appeared, and from it emerged Hades in his terrifying black chariot. Pulled by immortal, shadowy horses, he seized her and descended back into his realm to make her his queen. It was an act of violence, a kidnapping, but we must see it through the lens of their world. Unlike Zeus, who regularly used deception and transformation to trick and assault countless mortals and nymphs, Hades was direct. He didn't lie. He didn't disguise himself. He took her to be his equal, to share his throne. On Earth, the consequences were catastrophic. Demeter's grief was a force of nature. She scoured the entire world searching for her daughter, her sorrow so profound that she completely neglected her divine duties. The crops withered, the trees shed their leaves, the earth grew cold and barren. A perpetual winter fell upon the world, and humanity began to starve. The gods on Olympus, deprived of their sacrifices from dying mortals, began to worry. They begged Demeter to relent, but her ultimatum was absolute. The earth would remain barren until Persephone was returned. Finally, Zeus was forced to act. He sent Hermes, the messenger god, down to the underworld with a command. Hades must release Persephone, and here, we see Hades not as a stubborn tyrant, but as a ruler bound by law. He agreed to obey Zeus's decree, but before his queen departed, he offered her a final taste of his kingdom, a few seeds from a glistening blood-red pomegranate. Persephone, whether out of hunger after her long stay or out of a developing connection to her new home, accepted and ate them. This single act sealed her fate. An unbreakable ancient law of the cosmos decreed that anyone who consumed the food of the underworld was bound to it forever. It wasn't a trick invented by Hades. It was a fundamental rule of existence that not even Zeus could overturn. When Persephone returned to her mother, the truth was revealed. Demeter's joy turned to fury, but the law was the law. A compromise was reached, one that would forever shape the world. Persephone would spend 2/3 of the year on Earth with her mother, and during this time Demeter's joy would bring forth the life of spring and the abundance of summer. But for the remaining third of the year, she would return to the underworld to rule as its queen beside her husband. During this time, Demeter would mourn, and the world would fall into the cold slumber of autumn and winter. Thus, the myth explains the seasons, but it tells a deeper story. Over time, Persephone was not a captive, but a formidable queen. She embraced her role, ruling with a stern authority that sometimes surpassed even that of Hades. Their marriage, born of violence, evolved into one of the most stable and equal partnerships in the entire Greek pantheon. Hades' capacity for justice and even mercy is further illuminated by the tragic tale of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus was the greatest musician of the mortal world. His songs could charm wild beasts and move mountains. When his beloved wife Eurydice died from a snakebite, his grief was so immense that he dared to do the impossible. He journeyed alive into the underworld to beg for her return. His music was his key. He sang a song of such sorrow and beauty that it disarmed the entire realm. The ferryman Charon was moved to tears. The fierce Cerberus lay down and whimpered. Even the tormented souls in Tartarus paused their eternal suffering to listen. He finally stood before Hades and Persephone and played his lament. The song was so powerful that for the first and only time, the unyielding king of the dead was moved to pity. Hades did the unthinkable. He agreed to break his own laws and allow Eurydice's soul to return to the world of the living. But he set one simple, yet absolute, condition. Orpheus must walk ahead and lead her out of the darkness. He must not, for any reason, look back to see if she was following until both of them had fully stepped into the sunlight. Orpheus agreed and began the long, agonizing climb. He could hear her faint footsteps behind him, but the silence and the shadows played tricks on his mind. Doubt began to poison his heart. Was she really there? Had Hades tricked him? Just as he stepped out of the cave entrance into the blinding light of the living world, his faith broke. He turned around, saw her face, a ghostly image of his beloved, for one fleeting, heartbreaking instant before she was pulled back into the darkness forever. The deal was broken. The tragedy was entirely human. Hades had shown compassion and kept his word. It was Orpheus' own weakness that sealed their fate. Hades' interactions with other heroes also cement his character. When Heracles, as his final labor, was tasked with capturing Cerberus, he didn't storm the underworld with brute force. He approached Hades respectfully and asked permission. Intrigued by the hero's audacity, Hades agreed, on the condition that Heracles could overpower the beast without using any weapons. Heracles succeeded, showed Cerberus to his cousin, and then, as promised, dutifully returned the hound to its master. It was a transaction built on mutual respect between a god and a hero. Contrast this with the tale of Theseus and Pirithous. The arrogant Pirithous decided he would kidnap Persephone to be his own wife. The two heroes descended to the underworld with this outrageous plan. Hades, aware of their intentions, didn't meet them with violence. He met them with cunning hospitality. He invited them to sit and feast, but the chairs they sat upon were the chairs of forgetfulness. They became magically bound to the stone, trapped for their hubris. It was a quiet, eternal, and fitting punishment. So, after all this evidence of his fairness, his adherence to rules, and his solemn dedication, why is he remembered as a villain? The answer is simple and deeply human. Hades is the face of our greatest and most universal fear, death. He represents the unknown, the inevitable end that no one can escape. It is far easier to project our fear onto a figure and turn him into a monster than it is to accept the natural, terrifying reality of our own mortality. The ancient Greeks themselves were so afraid of him they often refused to speak his name, referring to him with euphemisms like Plowton the Rich One, for the treasures of the earth. Centuries later, as the pagan world gave way to Christianity, this fear was codified. The complex, multifaceted Greek underworld was flattened and conflated with the concept of a fiery hell, and its ruler, the solemn warden Hades, was merged with the image of a purely evil cosmic antagonist. Satan, the god of finality, was reborn as the god of damnation, but his true legacy is that of order in a universe of chaos. While his brothers on Olympus were siring countless children, starting wars, and meddling constantly in mortal affairs, Hades remained in his kingdom, performing his thankless, essential task. He was the great equalizer, the one who reminded everyone, gods and mortals alike, that there are rules that cannot be broken. In the end, Hades was not evil. He was necessary. It was the pillar that held up the balance of existence, ensuring that life could have meaning precisely because it had an end. His story is not one of villainy, but of a profound and lonely duty, accepted with a quiet dignity that none of his more celebrated siblings could ever match. The greatest myth about Hades is the myth of his evil. The truth is that he was a king, in the truest sense of the word. So what do you think? Does Hades deserve his bad reputation, or is it time we rewrote his story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. What other misunderstood mythological figure would you like to see on the channel? If you enjoyed this journey to the underworld, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any legends. Until next time.